G'day folks, welcome to this week's episode of Learn to Paint TV. Rod here with you from the Learn to Paint Academy. This week I was down at Noosa Market, I go there every Sunday morning, and I came across, just across the road from the market, this beautiful little scene here of the lake and the nice reflections in the water and that nice foreground sort of mangrovey tree. Thought we'd have a go at this one. We're not going to try and do it exactly as you see it here. And I'm basically going to use, for most of this painting, my French ultramarine blue, the alizarin crimson and the yellow ochre with titanium white. I will add to that a little bit of a booster colour, cadmium yellow light or lemon yellow, and some phthalo green, just to punch up some of those greens in that foreground tree. And as I said, we're going to use the Moore method of painting. I've taught it to more than 35,000 students around the world now to great effect. So that's what we're going to follow, is that process. And it's all about 3 steps. Step number 1 is our drawing step. So let's get underway, and we'll get underway with our drawing step. Okay, first thing I want to point out is that the photo reference is quite panoramic and wide, whereas my canvas is more of a squared off canvas. As you can see here, it's a 12-inch by 16-inch canvas. So we can run into problems right from the outset if we try and religiously copy the photo. So I'm going to make some adjustments, which is why I said the photo reference is going to be just really a starting point. And what I want to do is create a piece of art here, a painting, of my own design, using this as a reference material. So what I'm doing here, step number 1, the drawing step, I'm just mixing up my blue and my red to get a bit of a dark there. And I want to keep this paint fairly loose, so I'll add more water to it. We want to keep our paint thin at the beginning and then start to darken it up as we go. I'm using water mixable oils. You could do this easily in acrylics or traditional oils. Very first thing to do is to get that horizon line in, because this particular subject, if we have a close look at the photo, has a very definite horizontal line running right through the painting there. So if we get that in as our starting point, then we're going to be good to go. Now what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to increase the amount of foliage and so on the distant embankment as well. So we don't want that horizon line to be at the halfway mark. Compositionally, that won't look good. So I want to come down below that mark and just run it through there. Just get it in roughly. It doesn't matter if we don't get that perfect because of the way we're going to do the trees and the reflections. So it's all about finding big shapes. So this particular subject, we've got a big sky and we've got our water. So there's 2 big shapes for us. But then on the other side of the river embankment, we have this tree line, and notice I've varied the shape of it up there just to get a bit of variety and so on. Don't make it too uniform, so create a little bit of interest in there, right? So I'll pop that in there like so, and then I'll just come in and I'll just loosely sort of repeat that. I don't think you need to try and get it perfect. If I try to, if you want to take the time to sort of really try and copy what's there, then do that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a foreground clump of foliage in there. Okay. And then I'm going to have some foliage up in through here and a little bit of overhanging foliage hanging down there. Okay. And perhaps a little bit more foliage up in that corner. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm just trying to find the overall shapes of this foliage here. Maybe it needs a little bit more through there. Okay, so I'm getting clumps of foliage, and we'll work the sky and around those clumps of foliage. And then the rest of it is going to be these interesting tree trunks, which are sort of coming out through there. There's a whole plethora, don't know if that's a word, of them through there. Run some out to that one there. Well, friends, that's really step 1. It's about finding big shapes and getting our composition and design right. Remember, we started off with this horizon line being below the halfway mark, really important. And then I put this row of trees in here and the reflection there. So that's another big shape there. So now we've got this one big shape through here. We've got our sky and our water, so 3 big shapes. And then we've got our masses for the foliage, which really becomes our 4th big shape, if you like, or treat these as one big shape and this one as one big shape. So that becomes 4 and 5. if you can start to look at your subjects in that way, where you can see the big shapes and you can identify how to put them onto your canvas correctly, then half the job's done. Because where most beginners run off the rails is they don't get their design and composition right. They put their big shapes in the wrong shape in the wrong place. So that's something to really focus on. So let's get underway with step number 2. Step number 2 now, we're going to start to put colour down here. Getting colour into this subject. Nice strong blues in the sky and the water. Good dark through here, and darks in the foliage is what we're going to aim at as part of our blocking. So let's get underway with step 2. Okay, so now we come to a big brush. We don't want to muck around with a small brush now. So a big brush like this one is what you want. Big flat brush with synthetic hairs. And it's all about getting the blocking down, and we're going to start off with our darker tones. So our darkest values are going to be in this area here and this foliage, because the embankment over here of this foliage is further away. So we just have to keep that in mind. Okay, so we'll take some of our blue here, a little bit more of our red, and again we want this to be a thin mix of paint. So we don't want it to be thick paint. Okay, really important, keep your paint nice and thin in these early stages of the painting. So I've got plenty of water in there because I'm using water mixable oils. If I was using traditional oils, then I'd be inclined to use whatever solvent that you use to thin it down. And of course, if you're using acrylics, then you could just use water for this stage as well. So mix up a nice big mix, come up here and go, okay, we're going to have foliage. Now I'm just going to scrub the brush in here. I don't want to be neat, right? So don't agonize over this and try and be really neat with getting this, because what we're painting here is just the underpainting, the shadow tone, if you like. And it's not our final finished thing yet. Okay. So just something like that. And even if I make it a little bit too big or the wrong shape, it's okay, because I'm going to come back in here with the darker values of the water, and I can push back into that paint because that's nice and thin. I could easily reshape it when we do the water. Okay, let's get a little bit more paint happening here. Whoop, wrong yellow. Okay, now I'm going to make those slightly darker, and as we get up into the sky up here, I'm going to make them a little bit greener, this mix, but still it's going to be on the dark side. At this stage, that's what we want, is dark tones in here, because we're going to put lighter tones over the top of it. So some overhanging foliage there, another bit of foliage there. Okay. And we're just massing this part up in here. Just a little bit more paint back in. Okay. Now, because it's a bit further away, it wants to just be slightly cooler in value. So you can see there's a very big difference between this tone and this tone in here. And what I mean by cooler is the further things get away from us, that's a little bit too dark still. The further in distance things move away from us, the reds and yellows start to drop out of that, of what you can see. So it becomes bluer, which is obviously a cooler tone. Okay, so I'll just pop that in there. Okay, and then we'll drag that down into the reflections as well. So again, I just want to reiterate, this is the shadow tone that we're putting in here. We will put warmer highlighty tones over the top of this in the latter step. I've just made it a little bit stronger, this mix, and not quite as light. as I get away from here, get a little bit more light over on this side, because I don't need quite as much separation, although it's probably just a touch dark, so I'll add a little bit more white into that. Okay, and raise that one up. We need one little area where we're going to have a few little bits sticking up like so. Okay. All right, now let us do the reflection. As I come down to the reflection, I'm just going to change my brush stroke. Okay, so where I was sort of just using a scrubbing technique for efficiency, now anything in the reflections, I just want to pull it down into the water like so. Okay, reflections always seem to work better when you're pulling them down into the water. So a little tip to remember, I'm going to let this all dry because it'll just make it easy for us to put our sky and water in around it. We can reshape our foliage and our tree line and this bush here, but it will be better to do that when everything else is completely dry. All right, friends, well, that's really the end of step 2, which is our blocking. Now, sometimes with step 2, I'll go a bit further and I'll do the sky and so on. It's just a matter of using your judgment as to when's a good time to take a little bit of a break and let things dry off. And because I want to use the sky and the water just to reshape a few things, it'd be good to have these areas dry. Now that won't take long to dry because I've just used water as my medium. It'll take 15-20 minutes, so it's a good chance to go and have a cup of tea. If you're using acrylics, you want to make sure this is fully dry before you move to the next step. Okay, welcome back, folks. We're now going to do step number 3 of the Moore method of painting. This is dried off pretty nicely, and we can now move forward with our painting. Okay, I'm going to start off with the sky here. The sky is quite blue, gets a little bit lighter towards the horizon. So we'll start off with that. Gives me a chance just to really reshape elements here. Make sure you mix up plenty of paint with this. And then I'm going to just give that a clean before going into my blue. And we'll try and get some of this cleaner part of the blue there. My colours do tend to get a bit dirty on the palette. So I'll get plenty of that blue. And what I'll do is I'll just mix them together here until I get a tone that I think will work. And it's probably a little bit bluer sky than what we've done in recent times on the program here. So it's around about there. It's definitely not the tube blue. So, you know, that's the tube blue there. You don't want to be putting that up. So it's going to be somewhere around about there. Okay. And it's a fairly consistent tone until about, well, just before it gets to the tree line there. Because with the blocking we've done so far, we'll obviously work back over that. But with this sky, I don't really want to be coming back into this and working over it. It's perhaps a little bit dark, but it will be okay for the top here. Now, in order to get a gradient, of course, we want to paint in bands across the sky, and then we can blend them together as we move down. I'll just get a little touch more white into that. It's just feeling a bit too blue. Okay, something like that. Let's continue on. Now, you don't need the quick drying medium that I'm using here. I use it, it's one that's designed for water mixable oils. It'd be an equivalent for standard oils and acrylics. Now, if you're using acrylics, you might want a retarder to slow down the drying time. But I'd only use that in the sky and the water. I wouldn't use it anywhere else, the retarder, because there's no need. It's usually the big areas that people have problems with acrylics. It's usually things like skies just not being able to blend. Okay, so I'm just going to work roughly around these shapes here. It's going to look a little bit patchy initially, but we'll see it come together once we progress the painting on a bit more. So there's a bit of foliage in here hanging down. It's a classic opportunity there for us to just move the edges around on a little bit if we need to. And because I let that dry off, I'm not having any problems at all with the colours getting muddy. Now just take more white, pop it in to here. I don't think we need to get much lighter than that. We may get one more little pass of light. And don't try and blend it up. You know, if you go lighter in the sky, just go up to the line here like so. But don't try and blend it up. Wait until you've laid the colour down first, and then you can blend the edges together. Okay. Look around those tree trunks. Doesn't matter if I lose them a little, as long as I know roughly where they want to go. We'll come back into that. Okay. Now I'm going to get just a little bit lighter again, so a little touch more white. Often, you know, when I get down towards the horizon like that, I might even put some warmer tones in there, a little bit of yellow, maybe a slight orange tone. But for today, we're going to keep it simple, and we'll just stick with the blue and white. Okay, so you can see that I can use this sky now to reshape along the tree line there. Okay, we're almost there. Blur up that edge if I feel it's a little bit too rigid. It's a little bit rounded there, but I'll fix that up when we put some foliage, you know, some brighter tones on there for the foliage. Okay, so now I've got a couple of little bands of colour there. You've got the darkest, middle, and slightly lighter. What I can do is just take my paper towel and I don't have to wash the brush, I just need to pull some of the paint out, like so. And I can just come up with this line. And if I just do a little zigzag sort of motion like so, and then I can just soften it in. There we go. Just to get a bit of a gentle sort of transition rather than a hard line. This one probably doesn't need the zigzag. So I'll just soften in along those edges there, basically. Okay, so when that settles down, that's going to make a nice bright summer's day sort of sky. So you can see I'll pour a little bit more of that blue into my mix, and the dark part is going to be closest to us. So I'll pop that in. Okay, and then we come into this lighter tone. I don't want to get too light, so I'll just pull some of that up into the darker tone there. And again, it's the same process that we just did with the sky. We're just going to do it in the reverse. good. Now while all that's nice and wet, I'm going to go and pop in a hint of some clouds. I'm just going to take pure white, like so, on the knife. You can do this with a brush if you want, but I find with a knife sometimes gives a good effect. And I'm just going to get a little bit of paint on the knife. And let's just do some clouds in through here. Just a hint of some clouds, you know, we don't want it to be a painting about clouds. But all of that's nice and wet, so if you've used a bit of retarder, if you're using acrylics, then you'll be able to do this quite easily, as I'm doing it with the oils. Gouache, a little bit more challenging because it will have dried out. Okay, let's come to the distant foliage on this embankment over here. And for that I'm going to use a medium size brush, about that size. And we can pick up some of this blue here, this blue and white, the sky mix, pull some of that out to a separate mix here. Get some of this yellow ochre, a little pinhead of the red, mix that together, a little bit more white, a little bit more yellow. Now it's going to be hard to tell on our palette whether that's the right tone or not. So what we need to do is just make a mix that we think looks right and then come over here and do a test. So let's just see, that's probably a bit too pale. A little bit more yellow ochre into that. Okay, and then what we're going to do is just find the edge of these trees here. Okay, still a little bit too pale. Push up a little bit more of that yellow ochre in there. Just getting a feel for how strong that tone needs to be. So that's looking a bit better like that. So I can just work that in. Try and keep in mind where the bottom of the foliage will be before it hits the reflections there. Okay. Pop a few up into the air there. Doing the opposite. In effect, where it's curving over that way, we've got to curve it back that way. And this is just a really simple sort of approach to getting the effect of some reflections there. Far more accurate than what I just was, of course. That's 100% up to you. Now I'm going to mix up a river embankment tone, which is going to be yellow ochre, alizarin crimson. Okay, I'll take some of that white. Get a little pinhead of this blue into it. Too much blue. So I'll get a bit more red and yellow into it. Okay, so now it's too much red. More yellow, a bit more white. What I'm looking for is a sort of a muddy embankment tone. There we go, that's kind of it, isn't it? Touch more white, just to lighten it. It's going to be off in the distance, so it's not going to be a strong tone. And then I'll just scrape it so I get a ribbon along the edge there. And then not everywhere. This is important that we don't put the muddy embankment everywhere. And then that just creates a little bit of separation there. All right, so that brings us now to our main foliage areas. And we're going to use a much more vibrant sort of tone, but we're going to do it in 2 steps. We want to get a middle value green in here first. So let's use this blue we've got, and let's get a chunk of that yellow ochre. You can see all my colours don't stay clean on my palette because I've got bad habits of doing that, but not to worry. A little bit of that cadmium yellow light there. No, we need more of that yellow ochre. So we want to get, we've already put our dark tone up there. We want to get to a tone that's sort of a middle green, okay? Because to get sort of form happening in an object, we need a dark, a mid, and a light tone. There we go, that's sort of a middle green. It's not the dark that we had before, but it's not our punchiest green that we can produce either. So it's a good idea to to do your color chart so you know what happens when you mix your different colors off your palette. Let's take a chunk of that, and just in this shadowed out area, I'm just going to start popping in some of this green. I've got to be careful when I come up to the sky there. Okay, I don't want to lose all of the darks I've already got in there, but certainly where the light's catching, I want to get this middle value in through there like so. A few little softer bits in there. You can see the difference, right? A lot of people say, oh, why don't you paint the sky first? Well, look what happened there where I just put some of the same mid-green directly onto the sky. The light tone in the sky just completely overpowers your darks. That's why we always put our darks down first. Okay. Now that's a sort of a traditional approach with oil painting. You can get away with acrylics without worrying about such things. However, I'd caution you against it because at some stage, chances are good you might want to have a go at gouache or oils, you just don't know. And learning I hesitate to say the correct way of doing it because there's always more than one way, but learning an approach that it facilitates you to transport or to move to another medium, I think is smart. Caution if you're not used to using phthalo green. Okay, it's a very strong pigment, especially when I combine it with this cadmium yellow here. Already had some of that tone on the knife, so it's just gone a little bit murky, but we can deal with that. Okay, so I'll just punch that tone up there, get some more of that phthalo green into it, and let's pop some of that up. Okay, so you're going to see that there's going to be a much stronger value of green, but we want that so that it's going to stand forward and push everything else to the back. Okay. I'm not going to put it everywhere because what I am going to do is just come back and just remix up a dark tone. I'll make that too red. Mix that to the side. There we go. We'll strengthen up that dark in there. In fact, I've made it even stronger. We'll get a higher level of contrast in there. Now, I'm doing this very rough, so you might want to take a little bit more time and care. I'm obviously doing it by way of demonstration, just to get you thinking about the ideas and the principles. Now, come to this foliage here, and we need to get this tone a lot brighter, so we'll take all of that cadmium light. We'll put it on the edge. I don't want to mix it right into the middle. That wouldn't be smart. Okay. You can see just by doing that, we've got a brighter version, but it's not as bright as the version there. So I'll just take some of that. And we don't need a lot of the highlight tone. It needs to be brighter than that. That's what we want. The cadmium yellow light, or the lemon yellow, it's not a really strong pigment, and it gets overpowered by the others quite easily, so just be mindful of that. Okay, so I'm just going to load just the tip and the edge of the brush, see that? Rather than having the whole thing loaded up. That'll give me more control. And then I can just come in here and just start to get some of those highlights in there. And really the only other thing I'd do to this, now again I stress that this is a demonstration, I'm going quite fast, and if I was doing it as a painting, I'd be going a fair bit slower, right? And being a bit more deliberate in my actions. But for the purpose of demonstrating, I think, hopefully getting the point, the only other thing I would do now is start to develop the tree. We'll start off with this dark, and I've got my little rigger brush here, right? So I'll just try and get the paint on the tip of that there. And now you've got to be careful doing tree trunks and things. Temptation to overdo it is strong, because you put on one bit and you think, oh, that looks good. So if that looks good, the next bit's going to look great, right? And there comes a point very quickly where, yeah, that last bit you did looks overworked. So just pointing that out just so you can be mindful of it. Okay. And again, I want to just stress that, look, I haven't even looked at the photo since we got our initial sort of shapes in, because I like to just let the painting in front of me tell me what it needs. Okay, so we get our dark version in, give the script liner brush a little bit of a wash. Then I've got this lighter tone here, which incidentally is the same mix that we use for the river embankment. Well, should work okay for our highlight tone. You don't want the highlight tone to be everywhere. All right. Well, there you go, friends. So we're going to leave this one right there. And hopefully you've seen the principles that we've been talking about, and you've seen how it all comes to life and how we build the painting up step by step. Basically 3 steps, 3 colors and 3 brushes. Now, once you master those, foundational sort of ideas, you can expand on it from there. But if you keep it simple when you're learning, and learn how to put together, good little demo paintings like this one, practice paintings, then you can start to expand out your skill set from there. But always start with the very basics, and that's what we've hoped to demonstrate here to you today. Nice little river scene, pretty easy painting. The way I've done it, super simple. Anyone could do it and have a go at it. So please do have a go, and I think you'll enjoy it. Now, if you haven't done so already, please register for our free course at the Learn to Paint Academy. The details will be on the screen underneath me or in the description. You can go there and register for our free course, and you can learn more about the Moore method of painting. And there's 4 or 5 different painting demonstrations for you there. And I'll see you next time on Learn to Paint TV. Cheers.